The cabin wasn't supposed to have ghosts. It was a standard-issue deep space survey pod, designation LSS 47, designed for solitary assignments beyond mapped trade lanes. One occupant, one biosignature, one voice at a time. I'd chosen it that way on purpose. After 12 years with the Stellar Cartography Corps, I'd learned that silence was safer than company, and distance made thinking clearer. So, when I found signs of someone else living in my cabin, my first assumption was equipment error. The first sign was small. A mug I didn't remember placing on the counter, its rim still warm. The second was harder to ignore. A folded thermal blanket on the auxiliary bunk, untouched by dust, creased neatly, as if someone had just stood up from it. The logs showed nothing unusual. No airlock events. No secondary life signs. The ship insisted I was alone. I told myself stress could do strange things, even to trained minds. Long missions had a way of bending perception. Still, I began documenting everything. On day 42, I heard humming. It came from the rear compartment, soft, tuneless, almost like someone trying to remember a melody they'd never heard properly. I moved slowly, hand hovering near the emergency intercom, every sense sharpened. The humming stopped the moment I crossed the threshold. The room was empty, but it felt occupied, the way a room feels after someone leaves suddenly. Air disturbed, presence lingering. On the workstation sat a small object I didn't own, a strip of translucent material, flexible and faintly iridescent, shaped into a loop. I didn't touch it. Instead, I ran a full environmental scan. Radiation normal. Gravity stable. No temporal distortions. No cloaking signatures. No anomalies at all. That night, I slept poorly. The dreams were worse. I dreamed of standing in the cabin doorway while someone stood just out of sight around the corner. I could hear her breathing, slow, patient, but whenever I tried to look directly at her, my vision slid away, as if my mind refused to complete the image. When I woke, the dream hadn't left me. On day 50, I spoke aloud. "I know you're here." The words echoed uselessly. Nothing responded. But later that cycle, the food synthesizer dispensed an extra ration, one I hadn't ordered. Nutritionally balanced, but unfamiliar in composition. The ship flagged it as externally modified. That shouldn't have been possible. I stopped pretending it was a malfunction. I set up passive sensors, old-school ones, not linked to the ship's main AI. Motion indicators, pressure mats, analog recorders. If something was avoiding detection, I wanted to catch it unfiltered. That was when I learned the rule. She disappeared when I appeared. Every time. The sensors showed movement when I was in the cockpit or asleep. Pressure changes. Heat signatures. Slight variations in gravity. Localized and brief. The moment I entered the cabin proper, the signals vanished, as if erased. It wasn't just physical. Even my thoughts felt redirected. When I tried to imagine her, my mind slid sideways, focusing on irrelevant details, the hum of the engines, the calibration of the star map, anything but her. It took me too long to realize that wasn't an accident. On day 63, I stopped trying to catch her. Instead, I left a note. Not digital. Handwritten, on actual paper, another old habit. "I won't try to see you, but I'd like to understand." I left it on the table and went to the cockpit, deliberately occupying myself with a stellar drift analysis that would take hours. When I returned, the note was gone. In its place was another strip of translucent material, arranged carefully beside my mug. And a single word, etched into the surface with impossible precision. Reciprocity. That was the beginning of our communication. It was slow, painfully so. I'd leave objects, notes, questions. She'd respond when I wasn't present. Symbols, arrangements, subtle changes to the cabin environment. Sometimes she'd adjust the lighting to match my circadian rhythm. Sometimes she'd reroute power to systems I'd been neglecting, improving efficiency without asking. She lived in my cabin. I just never saw her. I learned patterns. She preferred the observation alcove during stellar dawns. She avoided the cockpit entirely. She rearranged the cabin differently when we passed through dense gravitational fields, as if responding to forces I couldn't feel. I named her Iris in my logs, not because she told me to, but because the name felt like a bridge. Something about perception. Something about seeing. Weeks passed. Then months. The isolation I'd expected from the mission never came. Instead, I felt accompanied. Not watched. Not threatened. Simply not alone. That should have frightened me. It didn't. The turning point came when the ship encountered a phenomenon no chart had prepared me for, a region of folded space where stellar light bent inward, collapsing into a shimmering, impossible geometry. The sensors struggled. The AI threw warnings I'd never seen before. And for the first time, she didn't disappear. I entered the cabin to find the air vibrating softly, like the prelude to a storm. The temperature had dropped several degrees. On the far side of the room, something shifted, not vanished, not hidden, but incomplete. A silhouette, humanoid in outline but unstable, as if stitched together from overlapping probabilities. She stood where the auxiliary bunk used to be, her form flickering between presence and absence. I froze. She raised one hand. Not in warning, but acknowledgement. You can perceive me now, she said. Her voice wasn't sound alone. It arrived with context, emotion, and constraint, like a thought carefully packaged, so it wouldn't break me. Why? I asked, barely trusting my breath. Because the boundary is weakened here, she replied. And because you stopped trying to force observation. I swallowed. What are you? She tilted her head, the gesture slightly out of sync with the rest of her form. I am displaced, she said. Not in space. In state. She explained, slowly, patiently. Her species did not exist entirely in fixed physicality. They occupied a spectrum of probability, choosing solidity only when necessary. Observation, especially conscious observation, collapsed that spectrum. To be seen was to be forced into a singular, rigid existence. Painful. Dangerous. That's why you vanish, I said. When I'm present. Yes, she confirmed. Your awareness anchors reality. I cannot remain if you are fully observing. Then why stay here at all? She hesitated, a delay not of processing but of meaning. Because your cabin is quiet, she said. And because you do not impose yourself on what you do not understand. That hit harder than I expected. She told me she had been aboard long before I arrived, a stowaway of sorts, displaced during a transit experiment gone wrong. She couldn't return home without destabilizing herself further. My ship's isolation, its limited interactions, made it survivable. You could have left, I said. I considered it, she replied. But you adjusted your life around an absence. That is rare. The folded space region destabilized hours later. As it did, her form began to fray, edges dissolving into transparency. I won't be visible again, she said. Not like this. Will you still be here? I asked. Yes, she said. If you accept the condition. I already knew the answer. I nodded. The cabin returned to normal. The silhouette vanished. The hum of engines reclaimed the silence. Life went on. I completed my survey. Sent my data. Declined an early return. Officially, the mission was extended for anomalous research. Unofficially, I wasn't ready to leave. She still lived in my cabin. I'd feel her presence in the way objects moved when I wasn't looking, in the way systems optimized themselves gently, without instruction. Sometimes when I spoke aloud, I sensed understanding, not response, but reception. Years later, when I finally docked at a station, the feeling faded. The noise of humanity pressed in, loud and sharp. I felt the absence keenly then, more than ever before. But sometimes when I'm alone again, truly alone, I leave a mug on the counter. And sometimes when I return, it's still warm. She lives in my cabin. And I've learned that not everything meaningful needs to be seen to be real.